What is a tariff?
A tariff is a tax that a country places on another country's imports. In the US, what that means is that when we place an import tariff, it's not another country paying the US government. It is a domestic firm, a domestic importer, that's paying the US government. The Treasury Department is where tariff policy is established, and it's implemented by Customs and Border Protection. And so that's why sometimes you'll hear them called import duties or import taxes. That's where you get the government revenue from tariffs. So I've got three categories: tariffs as industrial policy, tariffs as economic statecraft, and then tariffs as political theater. Right? Tariffs as industrial policy, the point is to put those in place, and largely for them to stay in place, because it's to restrict imports from other countries. Just this week, we had steel and aluminum tariffs go in place. We've also had, earlier in January and February, two tranches, 10% of tariffs put against China. The sense is that those are there to stay, that those are long-term sort of policy decisions, and that is an attempt to not just balance trade with China, but also try to bring steel and aluminum manufacturing back to the United States. When we're thinking about the three dimensions of tariffs, so their breadth, how many countries they're applied to, their scope, how many industries, and then their duration, how long, we'd always expect tariffs as industrial policy to have a variable breadth, right? It depends on whether you're just targeting China or you're saying an entire industry, right? A variable scope, but a long duration. So let's talk about tariffs as economic statecraft. And this is sort of using tariffs in the same way we've traditionally used economic sanctions, to extract concessions from other countries, maybe completely unrelated to trade. So if we think about Trump tariffs against Canada and Mexico, the official claim from the administration is that these are about migration and fentanyl. And that's why there are emergency tariffs that are placed for sort of these emergency national security reasons. And those seem more clearly to extract some kind of concessions, at least officially, right, in terms of how they've been implemented through executive order. And so the idea with tariffs as economic statecraft, they're going to have a variable scope, whether they're focused on many industries or just one, but it's going to have a narrow breadth, right? It's going to be focused on really just a collection of countries or one country, right? And the idea might be not to even have to apply them at all. I've been relatively unsurprised that so far we've seen this off again, on again with tariffs against Canada and Mexico, because in as much as they are economic statecraft, you're sort of not wanting to apply them, at least for the long term. You're wanting to see whether you can extract those concessions that may have very little to do with trade. So political theater, I think, in terms of scope, breadth, duration, the jury's out on that, right? We really don't know. Right. Is Trump trying to impose these tariffs to extract concessions from other countries that are of key national interest? Because I think tariffs as political theater can look a lot like tariffs as economic statecraft. Or is this really an attempt by Trump to claim victory, save face, appear strong, perform the identity of still a strong U.S. economic superpower? And personally, I would argue that a lot of what we've seen thus far, which then does not break terribly with Trump's practices in the past, even his first term, is tariffs as political theater. And I mean, the ideal case study there is when he threatened tariffs against Colombia, when Colombia said they would not accept deported migrants in handcuffs. And then Trump threatened to put 25% tariffs on all of Colombia's exports to the United States, and very quickly back down. The issue with that, it might have these positive reputational effects. Maybe some people do perceive then the U.S. is shifting its political and economic weight around a bit more and appears stronger, and it's going to be a force to be reckoned with. But at the end of the day, does it actually serve any national material security interests of the United States? Or does it make the U.S. actually look weak? And look chaotic and look unorganized, and what I've termed sort of less industrial policy or protectionism, but that we're seeing these spontaneous protectionist fits of the administration using emergency powers. The problem is if you play your political theater and economic statecraft cards too much, you lose the ability to play your industrial policy card. because very easily the rest of the world can look away from the US and say, listen, the US is not negotiating in good faith here. It's unpredictable exactly what the policy on trade of the US is. So what we're going to do is we're going to go along with the project of globalization without the US. And we're going to try, and it's going to be painful and it's going to take time, but we're going to try as much as we can to try to recreate the export market that was the US among each other over time. And I guess that's my concern, is that at the end of the day, this is going to lead to the US being isolated from the global economy, relatively speaking.